I'll share my screen. Okay. Hi. Give me 1 second to get myself in order. I want to have my little chat window up so I can kind of watch that. Awesome. I see y'all are putting your names in. Thank you for that. If you did just join, if you could put your name in the chat, that just helps me with attendance. I just want to make sure, oops, didn't mean to do that. Make sure that I give you credit for being here this evening. So with no further ado, oh, one other thing, I'm just going to say it one more time. If you're not speaking, if you could stay on mute, that would be great to keep down the background noise. And please, if you have a question or a comment or you want to contribute, please take yourself off of mute to do so, and then just put yourself back on mute again. Yes. Well, why don't you tell them? I have a very important person here with me. He might be one of your favorite radiological emergency preparedness planners from North Carolina Emergency Management, Mr. Jay Royster. Yay! What did you want to say to everybody?
Hey, I want to say I appreciate everybody showing up for the reception center training emergency worker decon. It turned out it was quite well and well received. They were highly impressed with the operations of Revc. FEMA made a comment that I thought was pretty good. They had to prove that the fire department could do it because it was obvious that Revc could do it. So good job.
Y'all did really, really well. You represented Revc. I'm so proud of you, and just it was wonderful. You were a big help. So this is out in Lincoln County, right? Yeah, Lincoln County. So thank you all for that. And Mecklenburg. There was one in Mecklenburg as well. And these opportunities are going to keep coming up. So don't worry and don't feel like you were left out if you didn't make it to one of those. There are always
steak dinner for everybody.
There was not a steak dinner. He is lying. You know that's not in the per diem. All right. So tonight we are going to talk about a very serious. Oh, Tina said Jay and Mitch Burton made it easy. Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that, Tina. That was sweet. We're going to talk about psychological first aid and radiation emergencies. And you may notice that this slide, first of all, I think it's a cool looking slide, but also that is not my name on there. I did not put this together. I do have permission to use it, however. When Jay and I and a bunch of you also attended the Southeast Rep Conference last year in Charlotte, I attended this talk given by Shelley Stansel with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. And no, it was last spring. It was the one in Charlotte, not NREP. It was Southeast Rep. Kind of correct. You should know better. So anyway, I sat in on this talk and I liked it so much. I asked Shelley afterward, I emailed her after the program and asked her if she would be willing to share her slides with me. And she was very gracious and she did share them. So that's where this presentation comes from. So she is the author of this, and I'm giving all credit where it is due because she's done a great job with this presentation. So moving right ahead, there we go. All right, so the goals and objectives for this talk, we're going to identify prominent psychosocial issues that could be related to radiological exposure. We're going to identify the needs of special populations. We're going to examine evidence-based psychosocial interventions, including effective risk communication practices. And we're going to identify key elements of self-care for first responders, public health professionals, and citizens. I know that all of y'all have had CERT training, so a lot of this looks familiar because we do talk about psychological first aid. And disaster psychology is what it's called in CERT basic training, but as we all know, a huge part of that is taking care of ourselves, because we know in CERT and in Revc, my safety comes first, and I need to look out for myself, and then the people that I'm there to help. Well, my teammates come next, and then the people that I'm there to help. So that holds true here as well. But anyway, these are our goals and objectives for what we want to talk about tonight. So looking back at some major nuclear disasters and the psychological consequences of them. So let's look back to 3 Mile Island in 1979. This was really kind of where FEMA came from, right? So it was after this disaster happened at 3 Mile Island that it was decided we needed some oversight for these sorts of things, and that's when FEMA began. So that was, I mean, for all of us working in EM, that was an important thing that happened. Then, of course, Chernobyl was another major disaster. That was 1986, and that was in Ukraine, Russia-ish. That it's kind of a gray zone at this point. And then Fukushima in 2011, that's Japan, where they had the tidal wave, the tsunami that took out the nuclear reactor there. There are, when you think back to the history of how long we've had nuclear power, and I can really only come up with these three major incidents to talk about, and I think that that's a pretty good track record.
Unless you want it.
Actually, y'all could mute yourselves. I would appreciate it. So where was I? Yes. So the studies, there have been studies done on the psychological consequences of 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima, and they show that living through a nuclear disaster, that folks who lived near those zones, I mean, in all three of those events, that they do have high levels of PTSD, depression, and anxiety. No shock there, right? I think that doesn't surprise any of us. It's a scary thing. So what about the consequences of nuclear disasters? As we know, people are not always affected the same way. We can never say anybody who witnesses a car accident is going to behave XYZ, because everybody's different and how you react to any situation is different. So what do the decon workers and the survivors who live close to the reactor and the people who were evacuated, what do they experience? Everybody has their individual variables in any kind of disaster related incident. And that plays a role in the psychological outcomes. Specific groups like the decon workers and those living close by and the evacuees, they have a higher rate of mental health problems after a nuclear disaster. Specifically, PTSD, anxiety, and depression were the things that were seen most often. People with greater psychological resilience and social support systems had lower rates of psychological distress. Again, no great surprise there. Individual level interventions such as mindfulness training, behavioral activation, and cognitive reappraisal training have shown some benefits on improving psychological well-being. So we want to take that time to reflect, take time for mindfulness, maybe do some square breathing, something to just make you take some nice deep breaths. That can help certainly with anxiety, which can be a factor in any of these things. A lot of the measures that are in place are aimed at reducing, many of the measures that are in place that were aimed at reducing exposure to radiation actually increase the anxiety levels of the individuals who are nearby. And I think we can all understand that. I mean, just think about a frisker. And if you walk up to, somebody is watching you scan a bunch of people in line and it's not making any noise, and then you come up to them and it starts beeping, what do you think is going to happen with their anxiety level? First of all, they don't understand exactly what's happening. They don't know how much radiation it takes to set off a frisker. And now they're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. Like, that is the leap that people are going to make because they don't necessarily understand the whole processes. So in psychological first aid, we're looking to reduce the stress symptoms and assist in a healthy recovery following any traumatic event. In particular, tonight, we're going to talk about radiation and nuclear events, but this could be for a natural disaster, for a public health emergency, like, I don't know, a pandemic, like that would ever happen. Or it could even just be a personal crisis, something going on in your family or something. That is still trauma. And keep in mind that these symptoms can go on for years after the incident is over. And even once people know that physically I'm safe, I'm okay, I'm in a place that everything is fine, but they can still be affected by the psychological trauma involved in that incident. Yeah. All right, so we do see even people who witness a disaster they can feel like their own life could be in danger. People who are evacuated, you don't know what's going to happen. You're making me leave my home. When I come back, will I even have a home to come back to? Will it be safe for me to live there? Maybe folks who had a pre-existing mental or physical illness, they could also have some issues, maybe a greater issue than folks who didn't have anything going on before. We could see people suffering from social isolation, because if you're evacuated and now maybe you're quarantined somewhere, you might get to be just with your immediate family, but what about your friends or your extended family? And that social isolation can have a lot of negative effects on a person as well. It could lead to excessive fear of future consequences. Like, this happened once, it could happen again. Maybe it's going to be worse the next time it happens. I don't know. And again, I just want to mention PTSD, depression, and anxiety were like the top psychological impacts. And occasionally, very sadly, those things did lead to suicidal ideation or actual suicide. So this is nothing to mess around with. It's very, very serious, and it needs to be given the gravity that it deserves, because it's really important. We spend so much time talking about the physical side, especially in a radiation emergency, right? We're all there like, oh, we need to scan everybody. We need to make sure everybody's clean and everything. But when do we take time to just talk to folks and say, you know, how are you doing? Are you okay? What's going on with you? And just take that time to see how folks are actually doing psychologically at the event. Just one quick reminder, if you have joined in the last few minutes, please put your name in the chat, so that will help me when I go to take attendance later. All right, so I think we've seen something similar to this before in our CERT training. This is the phases, and it says here the phases of a radiation disaster. But honestly, this looks like any other disaster. It could be a tornado. It doesn't have to be radiation. We know that first responders and survivors are affected by this as well. Sometimes we know about things happening before the general public does. Anybody getting a little anxious right now, especially you guys in the eastern part of our state? We have a little friend named Aaron thinking about visiting us off the coast. Anybody starting to get a little anxious? Yeah, I know we are a little, even here in Raleigh, just because we're going on full activation tomorrow as of 0800. So it changes the rhythm of our lives, right? When we work in this profession, we know that we're going to have to change our plans at the drop of a hat because we've got some threat coming. So what if that threat is a radiation disaster? We may not get the warning like we get with a hurricane. Something could just happen out of the blue, and we don't have that in this graphic here. We see the threat, the warning, and then the impact. We may just start at event and there's no warning, it just happens. So let's see. In the threat phase, I'm going to skip that part because, like I said, we may not get to see that at all. So after the event happens, we may go into this honeymoon phase in a non-radiation disaster. I do want to point you to the difference here in the yellow line at the top of the graph and the white line at the bottom of the graph. So in a non-radiation disaster, we see that honeymoon phase where everybody bands together. This is a week to several months after the disaster. This is what you see on TV, and everybody's doing fundraisers, donating supplies, and doing all these wonderful things. And they say, oh, our neighborhood just banded together and we all helped each other out. And that's great. And it's awesome, but it doesn't last. What happens, and again, we're talking non-radiation at the moment, what happens after the honeymoon? Look what happens to that graph. It goes tumbling down, right, into disillusionment, because we're like, hey, I thought this wasn't going to be this bad, or I thought somebody would be here sooner to help me. What's going on? And so the optimism really fades to discouragement at that point, and the survivors may in fact feel abandoned, and they become resentful of disaster assistance agencies and volunteer groups because they think they're not doing enough, or they didn't come soon enough, or they're like, maybe FEMA or other organizations are already starting to leave, and people think that they just aren't ready yet. And why are you leaving? I still don't have my home back. What am I supposed to do? But you know what? there's another disaster happening somewhere else, and so they have to move on to that one. We don't see that whole honeymoon phase thing so much when it is a radiation disaster. We just sort of, it tumbles down and down, which is really interesting. And then there isn't much of a recovery phase, which I think is very interesting. So if you look at the bigger pictures like 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl and Fukushima, what is there we can do for recovery? So I know Chernobyl and Fukushima, those zones are still largely uninhabitable. So maybe there isn't a recovery phase immediately in that zone. So people have left the area, or maybe some people died, and so they were not able to recover in that area. So it is interesting to see the difference in a radiation disaster versus a non-radiation disaster in that slide, because this is certainly a graphic that I'm very used to seeing from CERT training. Sorry, I had to pause and get a sip of my drink because I'm getting dry. All right. So what is the role of mental health professionals? So this diagram showed us the various phases of disaster and the role of the mental health professionals and volunteers at each phase. So even before the incident happens, there's an opportunity to promote mental health training and capabilities. And then the disaster happens, you see the little red blob there. Once the disaster happens, the response should be to prevent mental health complications by utilizing stress management techniques. So we want to help people, teach them some self-care strategies and some other interventions. We don't want them slipping into that depression and anxiety. But we're looking for mental health interventions that could be curative and restorative, not just to the citizens in the community, but to the emergency workers as well. So we can see, we saw in the previous slide, the heroic phase and the honeymoon phase. And here we've got 1 week and then 2 to 8 weeks. This is just somebody's idea of how long this might take. There's really no exact number that you can put on these different phases. Like recovery takes as long as it takes. I can't tell you that 212 days from now, you're going to be fine. I don't know. It's just how long it takes each person. And then there's the disillusionment phase, and we could offer some curative care during that time. That could be up to 36 months or possibly longer. And then we start preparing for the next thing in our restoration phase. So we want to get back to that quote unquote normal. You can't see me, but I'm making air quotes with my fingers, because what is normal anyway? In my mind, sorry, taking a sip. In my mind, normal is that you are able to resume a meaningful life. So you're able to maybe go to work or go out with your friends, and you're able to smile and laugh and not dwell on the incident, right? That doesn't define you, and it's not everything about you. It's just one thing that maybe happened to you in life. So here's a quote: fear has powerful public health implications. How do you guys feel about that, working in the tangential field to public health? So researchers have actually surveyed the public regarding the images that they connect with radiological or nuclear events. And most of those images are negative and fear-based. And so people have really averse reactions, and they're feeling dread and they're feeling fear. Current research does show that fear is one of the most powerful of our basic core emotions, and that if you stay in a prolonged state of fear, that can almost always result in a psychopathology. So if you're just afraid all the time, it wears on you, and it has a profound effect on your own mental well-being. It also promotes an excessive release of cortisol into the bloodstream. Many of you already know this. And that can lead to physiological consequences like an impaired immune system. And it just has lots of bad consequences. It can make you gain weight. There's so many negative aspects to having an overload of cortisol in the system. And because of the nature of radiological events, a fear of unknown consequences will be a prominent factor. And it could remain for substantial periods of time. And it could even be years. because maybe if you live near a plant and there's some, even if it's a relatively minor incident that happens, you may live in this fear like, well, okay, it's been 6 months and I'm fine, but am I going to get sick 10 years from now or 15 years from now? And you might just live with that fear, like I'm going to get sick because I live near this event. Um, and that is not healthy. Even just the worry about it is not healthy psychologically or physiologically. And even if you have children after that exposure, you may worry if your children will be healthy. What's going to happen to them? What if a woman was pregnant when the exposure happened? She may always be concerned about what kind of an effect that's going to have on the child. And we learned during COVID that the public, here's a shocker for you, they don't always trust or believe what the government is telling them. They don't think that the government is always telling them the truth. There's a shocker. This is where I feel we need to broaden our scope of training as RevC volunteers. Everything that you have learned to this point is really important, and you're making a difference, and FEMA is noticing, which is really exciting. And I think that education of the general public is the next direction in which we need to branch, because we can help to alleviate some of this fear. Think of people who, even if nothing bad has happened, but they live near a plant and they just have this worry at the back of their mind all the time, like, oh my gosh, I live 15 miles from a nuclear power plant. What if something happens? If we as RevC volunteers can go out into the community and educate them about the safety of these plants, I think it could go a long way to alleviate those fears that they may have, and that could really be a powerful thing. But I digress. There we go. All right. So, part of the issue with radiation is that you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you don't know if you've been exposed easily, and so that also contributes to that fear and uncertainty. Somebody may not know that they could even have possibly been exposed until they see a news report, or they see the first responders out there, or they see a decon unit, and they think, oh my gosh, I was just there. Maybe I've been exposed. I don't even know if I have been exposed. And now that fear starts to creep in. I have found that people have a real profound fear of radiation and nuclear power plants, basically because they don't have a good understanding. And there's many of you that know way more about this stuff than I do, but just the little bit that I have learned in the last couple of years, I think nuclear power plants are great and safe, and I would live right next to it and not have any fear at all. But a lot of people don't feel that way. It also surprises me that I meet people very often who live right in Apex or Pittsburgh or really close to Sharon Harris. I'm using that as an example because that's close to where I live, and they have no clue that there's even a nuclear power plant there. And then, of course, they become afraid. And so we need to help them overcome those sorts of fears, because it's not productive to live in fear all the time. I'm getting too far down in the rabbit hole. I apologize. So we have this fear of the unknown. I can't see radiation. I can't smell it or taste it. And so I may feel afraid. I may be anxious. I feel like I don't have control of this situation. How can I keep myself safe? How can I keep my family safe if I'm not in control of this issue? I may be afraid of contamination. What about my garden? Is my garden safe? What about the water that I drink that comes from the water table here? And then that can even lead to a disruption in social networks, which there's been a lot of studies done on the importance of staying in touch with whoever your social network is. And it could be different for all of us. Maybe for you, it's family, maybe it's close friends, whoever it is that's like your people, you want to know where they are. And it could be very scary if you were evacuated from an area and you can't get in touch with your people, then that is really going to lead to heightened anxiety and fear, and that's not going to help the situation at all. All right, so let's look at some of the psychosocial effects of exposure. We've talked already about some of the issues that are related to radiological events, and typical response profiles show that there's evidence-based psychosocial interventions for each group, and we will get into that a little bit more. There are atypical reactions to a radiation event that will require immediate intervention that would be different from a non-radiation event. So we need to be aware of that. There's this thing, does anybody know, this is a little test to see if you're really listening. What is MUPS? M-U-P-S. Who can tell me what that is? You can speak up or write it in the chat. M-U-P-S. Anybody know? Okay, I'll tell you. It's medically unexplained physical symptoms. MUPS. Medically unexplained physical symptoms. So it's sort of like hypochondria, sort of. Although you can see people in an area exhibiting similar symptoms, even when there really isn't any reason for them to be sick. But I might go, oh my gosh, I live near that plant and I heard there was something that happened yesterday and now I feel sick. And I'm going to tell my neighbor about it. And you know what? Now she feels sick too. And then the neighbor on the other side all of a sudden has the exact same symptoms. But if you take them to a doctor and have them checked out, there is nothing medically wrong with these folks. And so we call that MUPS, M-U-P-S, medically unexplained physical symptoms. And it can be really a psychological issue. So we need medical professionals. We need healthcare workers to help us help those people, because as far as they know, they are suffering and they have an issue. And we do want to help them with it. It's just not the issue that they think it is. We need good communication when we talk about risk, and let people know how safe they actually are and that they're going to be okay. And, oh, I didn't mean that. Okay, there we go. I wanted to get to that last bullet there, compassion fatigue. Oh my gosh, you all know this. A lot of you work as first responders or in related fields. And this compassion fatigue, y'all, it is real. That you are so busy taking care of everybody else that you neglect to take care of yourself. And you will suffer for that in the long run. You have got to find a way to take some time out and take care of yourself. And just even if it's go and take a 20-minute nap. Naps are so restorative. I love a good nap. And it can really make a big difference. And yes, Angela said that it's similar. The MUPS is similar to a mass hysteria. That, you know, one person says, oh my gosh, now I have a headache. And then the next person says, you know what, I have a headache too. And it can be very, I don't want to belittle it, because the people believe they have the symptom, but it's not caused by what they think it's caused by which they think it's caused. Did not want to end that sentence with a preposition. All right. So let's look then about our human responses to disasters. And that will vary depending on how close the individual is to the incident and how that incident directly or indirectly impacted themselves, or their family, or their friends. And the closer they are to, I'm going to say ground zero, that's not probably a great term to use here, the more impacted or the more likely the response will have a negative mental health implications. So we could see survivor's guilt, especially if somebody, dies or is severely injured in an incident and I'm fine. I may feel guilty, like, why did that happen to my friend, but it didn't happen to me? Why is my neighbor's house totaled and my house is fine? And so we could see a survivor's guilt there. We could have this fear of losing control over the situation or losing control of our own emotions because we're so ramped up and so scared that there's that fear of losing control. We may be worried about becoming mentally ill. We might think that whatever's released is going to cause us to become mentally ill, or we just are getting so anxious that it could lead actually to mental illness, which in turn can lead to substance abuse because you're trying to, I'm sorry, it's a substance use, which could also be abuse. Trying to get rid of that anxiety. Well, I'll just have a couple of drinks and that'll make me feel less anxious. Not a super healthy way to try to deal with anxiety, but you know, a lot of people, that's what they do. And then we really, really hope that it never comes to this, but there could be death wishes or suicidal ideas. If you encounter anybody or a family member or a friend who gets to this point where I just feel so bad, there's nothing that I can do that's ever going to make me feel better. I just want to die because this is worse than being dead. This is somebody who seriously needs some mental health professional help. It's not our role. Some of you may be mental health professionals. I am not. But if I heard a friend talking like this, I would be adamant about getting them to a higher level of care. They really need somebody to talk to, somebody who's going to know how to help them out of that situation. And that would be our role there. Not that we can fix it, but we can help to get them to that care. So things that we want to look for that we would be concerned about, if we think someone's acting like they could be a danger to themselves or to other people, remember whose safety comes first? Mine, right? So your safety comes first for you. So if somebody is a danger to themselves or to other people, first of all, if they're going to be a danger to me, I need to physically distance myself from them, but I also need to get them some help. So I need somebody who professionally can deal with that and to get some help for them. If a person is disoriented to time, place, or person, maybe they have an injury, maybe they hit their head, maybe they're just so freaked out by what's going on that if you ask them, hey, do you know what year it is? Do you know where you are? Ask them questions. You have to ask them questions that you would know the answer to. If I just ask them their name, what is your name? That's not a good judge unless I actually know what their name is, right? So see if they are oriented correctly. If they've lost a family member in the disaster, that is going to put them high up on the list of definitely needing some help, and we need to get somebody to deal with them on a professional basis. If their own life, they feel like their life is in danger because of the disaster, that is going to ramp things up for sure. If they themselves have a physical injury or someone in their family does, or even a perceived physical injury, such as possibly radiation contamination. Again, as we all know, I can't see it, smell it, taste it. How do I know that it's there? Maybe I'm just so worried about it that can ramp things up for that person. Maybe they feel that their relief has been delayed or their evacuation was delayed. Why didn't you evacuate us sooner? We shouldn't have been left in there that long. And oh my gosh, what if they can't find one of their family members? That is a terrifying situation and can really, really make people anxious. Just you want your tribe together, right? And so if you can't find a family member, that's highly, highly anxiety ridden. And then, of course, if the person already has a past history of mental illness or substance use, then that could also ramp things up for them. So what do we need to do as an emergency worker? How can we provide psychological first aid, not final care kind of psychological first aid, but we sort of need to triage these people on their mental well-being after we've triaged their physical well-being. And really what we need is you genuinely need to care about these people and be willing to treat them the way you yourself would want to be treated. So I'm not going to read this whole slide to you. I know that you all can read, but look at this and think about which of these skills do you possess. I'm not saying you have to have all of them, but let's look at some of the attributes and skills that would be really important in an emergency worker. I'm just going to say good listening skills. I'm reading that one to you. Sorry, but sometimes people just want to talk. And if you're willing to just be there and sit with them and listen, that can mean a whole lot to somebody. That doesn't mean they want you to fix anything or even offer any advice, but just let them spill it, right? Let them get it off their chest. Let them talk while you just listen to them. And I think you can see everything else on this list. Let's talk about that last bullet point, though. What about flexibility and tolerance during chaos, right? So I've said this lots of times that in emergency management, how often do we start with plan A and we actually finish our mission on plan A? It almost never happens. We have to be flexible. We have to be willing to change courses in midstream and just be flexible, be easygoing about it, and know that your role may change at a moment's notice, but just go with wherever the flow takes you. Stan has a comment. He said it's a ministry of presence. I think he's referring to the listening, and that's a great way to put it. Even just being with someone, it can really make a big difference, because they may be feeling very isolated, very alone, but if they feel like at least you, this Revc volunteer who's working at that reception center, you care about them enough to say, hey, I'm going to just sit with you a minute if that's okay. And if you want to talk, that's great. I'm here to listen. And it's just about making a connection, right? It means a whole lot. All right. What other things can you do to help? So maybe you can get that person to engage with you. Maybe just ask them questions, not yes, no questions, but like, so did you grow up around here? Where did you grow up? You know, ask questions where they have to answer a little bit more, and maybe not even about the event. Let's talk about something completely different, just to get their mind off of it, because they may get so centered on what's happening right now that if we just get them to talk about something else, that can be good. As an attentive listener, we all know this, that communication is really 80% nonverbal communication, and only 20% the actual words that you're speaking. So look for body language, look for what are their eyes doing, what is their facial expression. You'll be able to tell what it is that they might need. And then help them to stay calm and connected, self-efficient. And then ask them, what can you do to help them? Sorry, I have to take another sip. So Stan also mentions using the phrase, how are you holding up? He says that comes from the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team. But that's just a good way to approach talking to people. What if the emotions get really, really intense? That can be really overwhelming for responders as well as everybody else in the room. So if one person in there is getting very emotional and you can sense that everything is ramping up, the best thing for you to do is stay calm yourself. And it says stand or sit squarely facing the survivor, but keep your posture open. So you're not crossing your arms or crossing your legs. You're going to lean forward and keep eye contact with them as if they are the only person in the room. Like, I am only here to listen to you. This is my whole job. This is what I'm here for. And lean into them. We're going to use positive language. Be very polite. Use please and thank you as you talk to them. If you don't know their name, maybe you can say sir or ma'am. I know in the South that that's normal for us, but you know, I was actually chastised by somebody in the North when I called her ma'am, and she thought I was being sassy. So I was like, sorry, that's how I was raised. I call people ma'am. So know your audience, right? It's that cultural sensitivity that comes along with that. But don't allow yourself to be verbally or, God forbid, physically abused. So if it gets to that point, you need more help than what you can give them. And if you're at a reception center or a shelter, then we should have like law enforcement. I hate to bring that into it, but especially if this person is getting dangerous, we need for them not to hurt themselves or anybody else. But if you can give them some space, as long as they aren't, you know, damaging or dangerous to anybody else, make sure they know what your name is, your first name. Say, hey, I'm Samantha. What's your name? What can I call you? and then let them focus on concrete, closed-ended questions. And so in the first part, we were asking for more open questions, right? But now if they're getting a little more intense and a little more ramped up, maybe we want to keep their answers a little shorter so that we can help them to focus a little bit more. It can be really difficult to manage the emotions of anybody in a disaster. And again, this is where you may need someone else to help you. And Erica says it reminds her of interacting with a toddler or someone with dementia. You try to hear them and then de-escalate it, but at the same time, your own mind is running with 100 other things. So yes, you have to quiet your own mind as well when you're trying to help this person to get quiet. It can be very challenging. So we may get to the point that we have to refer them to a mental health professional. And again, remember, physical safety is above all the most important thing. My safety, the safety of the survivor, the safety of everybody else at the reception center. And as long as they are in their relatively open or right mind, they can refuse any behavioral services. It may come to a point where we can't override that, but a mental health professional could and say, look, you're going to the hospital. But that would not be our call. That would be a mental health professional again, especially if we think that person is going to harm themselves or they're going to harm anyone else. So that's when we would need to step in and get somebody else to help. Also, if the person is openly talking about suicide, or maybe they have a child with them and you're very concerned about the child, we have to step in and protect them. If we think there's a possibility of criminal activity, or if somebody, let's go to the flip side. What if they're very socially isolated and just sitting off in a corner all by themselves? Is that somebody you would feel comfortable approaching? And it's okay if your answer is no, because guess what? We're not all good at this. And somebody is and somebody isn't. So somebody who's there, you might say, hey, I know that you're really good at talking to people. And I'm concerned that this guy's been sitting over here in the corner. He doesn't talk to anybody. He hasn't come up and eaten any of the food. And we need to kind of check him out and see what's going on. If it is beyond your training or capabilities, we really need to refer that person, and we need to get the mental health professionals in there to help us with this. Maybe we have people that we think are dependent on drug or alcohol, if they're engaging in any risky or threatening behavior, and if it's difficult to maintain contact, so they're just not like with us. I think you know what I mean by that. So we need to refer them to some help. So some other interventions, psychosocial interventions we might have. A lot of people who are affected will recover with time and support, but they may require either just a little bit of professional treatment or even no professional treatment. But some people do require more treatment. So especially after a disaster or a terrorist event, the three groups of affected individuals typically emerge. So there are those who are distressed. When we see that there it could be benign or mild. So we're going to identify those people, assess them, and monitor them. And then if they actually manifest behavioral changes, then they could be at a high risk to develop those psychological disorders. And we need to immediately take action and make sure that they are taken care of. We need professionals to help deal with those folks. That's not us, right? Not Revc volunteers, but we do need somebody to help out those who are into the dysfunction phase there. So how do we know who those people are? Things that we're going to look at. So typical reactions and symptoms, if they're cognitively impaired, so they can't concentrate for a long period of time, or even for a short period of time, maybe. Someone who's very disorganized, they have a hard time making decisions, they can't pay attention to anything. Or maybe they're very emotional, they could be in shock, they're very fearful or anxious, worried, or irritable, angry. They seem hopeless or helpless, and they just feel overwhelmed. So this could present as somebody who just seems very frustrated with the whole process. Why am I at this reception center? You need to let me go home. There could be a lot more going on there besides just somebody who's being annoying, right? There could be more. under the surface. Some behavioral issues, we could see sleep disturbances, appetite disturbances, difficulties being alone. Some people are just really afraid to even be alone after a significant event has happened. We could see an increase in substance use. And then physically, we might see somebody who sweats a lot, they're hyper aroused, increased heart rate, which we may not know if we're not actually putting a stethoscope on them. They could even become dizzy and have higher blood pressure, or seriously fatigued with headaches, GI distress, nausea. And then there's that MUPS again, right? We saw that. The medical, I forgot what it's for now, but you know what I'm saying? The medical thing with no physical symptoms. And then we have the spiritual needs. What? Yes, idiopathic. We need to think about people's spiritual well-being as also. It's a very important thing. So they might just feel uncertain. I don't know what's going to happen. Why did this happen in the first place? They could feel abandoned. Why would God let something like this happen? And that's another realm where they may need professionals in another area that we may or may not have available. Hopefully we have people available to us in the reception centers that they can talk to. And if you're comfortable with those issues, maybe you're the one to talk with them, but maybe you need other help. And either way is fine. Let's just make sure these people get whatever it is that they need. So what interventions can we provide for people who are distressed? So for your own attitude, we want you to be calm and warm. Acknowledge them, recognize that they're, I see that you're very anxious. I understand how anxious that this makes you feel. Express your empathy. And really, you have to be genuine, because people know if you're BSing them, right? You need to be genuine in how you feel about them, and give them some empowerment. Show them that, look, you've made it here. You're here. You're safe. We're taking care of you. And remember, we're not going to say everything will be fine, because we don't know that everything will be fine. But we want to have that positive attitude and try to show them the good things that they have done. So actions we can actually take are getting information from them. Just, where do you live? Who's your family? Especially if somebody's missing. Who have you not found? What's their name? Where would they most likely be? That sort of thing. Attend to their safety needs as well as their physiological needs. So let's do a physical assessment on them as well as a psychological assessment. Let them know what's going on. There shouldn't be any secrets around all this. It's like, yeah, so there was an event at the plant, and here's what's happening, and here's how they're fixing it, and let them know all of that relevant information. Try to avoid any kind of negative social support. So anybody who is not being a very positive influence on them, try to keep them away. And then if you need help helping them with traumatic grief, then we need professionals there to help us with that. All right. So symptoms of people who may display some behavior changes: fearfulness of leaving home, decreased travel, refusal to send children to school. So these are folks, but this is a distress reaction that could be more severe. It tends to last a longer period of time, and it can cause a greater impairment. So if you notice any of these, this isn't going to be something, like I said, these are more longer term. It may not be something that you're going to notice at a reception center, but this would be something that's going to be a little further down the road. Just something to be aware of in people in the community. And there we go, medically unexplained physical symptoms. That's our MUPS on there again. So things to watch out for people with behavioral changes. What interventions do we have for them? Well, ideally, we want to promote and accelerate their recovery and to prevent any maladaptive behaviors, right? So we don't want them picking up bad habits to try to help them cope with the things that are making them anxious. That would be a maladaptive behavior. Some of our intervention elements, if we can provide some education on how to cope with disaster situations, that could be helpful. Help them with their problem solving. What about just asking the question, what are you anxious about? And then maybe we can find a really simple answer to that and figure out, oh, well, we have a solution for that. And if you can break things down, it may seem in any kind of disaster situation, whether it's radiological or not, it seems so big. It's like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. So you look at this huge problem that we have and let's break it down. Like, well, what right now, today, what is your biggest concern? And then if you can address that and help them to figure it out and do some good problem solving, that might be really helpful. Maybe even some writing exercises, have them write things down that are bothering them. That for some people that's helpful, for other people it's not. It really depends on the individual person. And then also helping them get connected with their own social support. Is there somebody I can call for you? Is there, somebody I can put you in touch with? They may have, their best friend who lives in Kansas that they really need to talk to right now. We'll see if you can get them on the phone and let them talk to their best friend. Whatever it is you can do to help them with their own support system, that would be really helpful. I think fall allergies are starting early. So how do we know who is more likely to develop psychological disorders after any kind of an event, be it radiological or not? So we're talking about PTSD, depression, and anxiety, which altogether are known as the trauma spectrum disorders. So if you've had a prior exposure to trauma, you may be at higher risk. How long were you exposed to the event? That could make you more susceptible to these trauma spectrum disorders. If you had a sustained hyperarousal, so you were really anxious for an extended period of time, there was a disruption to your social support, there was a sustained dissociation, so you were without the things that you need there, you've lost your resources, or if you already had any psychological disorders previously, that could make those people higher risk for these psychological disorders. What can we do about that? So if we can screen them and try to identify those folks, that's going to be, I think, really hard to do, say, at a reception center. Maybe once we have everybody in and they've been screened and everything, we'll have more of a chance to speak with them. But they may not disclose also if they have had a history. So we're going to try to identify those individuals, and if we can bring in some mental health professional who can help out with that, hopefully that's going to be a free treatment. It says free or low cost. I hope that would be a free treatment that would be available to them while they're there. And then hopefully somebody's following up with them to track the outcome over time. That's not going to be our job, right, as Revc volunteers, but it would be good that somebody does follow up with them in the long run. Some atypical responses. So some portion of the population may have an extreme response, and this would merit more rapid attention, like an inability to attend to self-care, someone who can't even clean themselves, bathe, or eat, or change their clothes, and there's no medical reason for that. They really need some help from a mental health professional. Severe agitation, symptoms of psychosis, which we may not know what those are, but you are going to recognize somebody who's just acting inappropriately. And I would say, especially if we get down here to violent behavior and or homicidal threats, that is definitely outside of our scope of training. And you need to keep yourself safe, and we need to, get somebody else involved to help deal with these people. But they do require immediate evaluation, so we make sure that they get the appropriate care. Again, not in our wheelhouse, most likely. So a little bit more about MUPS. That's the medically unexplained physical symptoms. It could be multisystemic or a non-specific complaint, but there's no physical or organic cause. Symptoms are not imagined. They are bona fide physical reactions, but they're caused by psychological distress. So I may feel like, and I may actually have heart palpitations. So my heart is racing and I feel like I'm going to pass out. But there's really nothing wrong with my heart, and I don't have a cardiac condition. It's all related to psychological distress, and that's anxiety, right? We know that oftentimes people think they're having a heart attack when it could actually be an anxiety attack, and that's not uncommon at all. Mumps are common after disasters, and especially something like a radiation disaster where there may be concern about contamination, or did I inhale something, or is there something on my skin? They could even whip themselves into such a psychological state, they could manifest a rash on their skin that still is not going to have an actual medical reason for that rash to be there. It's amazing actually what the mind can do. So how do we deal with that? We want to provide information to them about the actual risk of being there and how low the likelihood is of a contamination. And somebody put in the chat for me, what percentage of contamination is probably on the clothing? And if I can just get their top layer of clothing off, how much? Quiet, I want them to put it in the chat. Don't listen to Jay. Somebody put in the chat what percentage of that radiation can just go away if I just take off even just the top layer of clothing. 80%, 90%, 65 is a little low. It's more in the 80 to 90% of radiation. So what if I walk through that portal monitor and it goes off and I just take off my sweatshirt and then you rescan me, I may show little to no radiation now. And maybe we're gonna have to get somebody. All right, somebody needs to mute. I'm trying to see who it is. Maybe you may have to get them actually with all their clothes off and in the shower, but a lot of times it's just that top layer of clothing could just come off. And so just letting them know that, like, look, this isn't even on your skin. It's on your outer layer of clothing. And now you walk through the portal monitor and it doesn't go off at all. That can help them to calm down and to realize that, hey, maybe things aren't as bad as I thought. I don't know why I have that funny break in there. People may disregard or disbelieve the facts of what you're telling them. It's just important to just tell them the truth and let them know what's going on. And that any kind of psychological or pharmacological treatment is intended to reduce the symptoms, not to convince them that their symptoms are not real. Their symptoms are real. They're just not symptoms of what they think they are. But you don't have to tell them that. I mean, if I think I'm having heart palpitations and I'm actually having heart palpitations, you're going to have a hard time convincing me why I am or why I am not. But it's just important to believe them and also tell them some truth that maybe they can understand. Maybe things aren't as bad as I thought. So groups who are more likely to develop significant psychological issues are women with young children, pregnant women, children themselves, and look at this next bullet, first responders. Does that surprise anybody that they're even on the list? Like, I thought we knew kind of what was going on, but maybe not. I think it's kind of funny that they're on there. On the other hand, as we know, first responders see a lot and get involved in a lot. And so they do have psychological issues, but maybe it's a different type than what other people are going through. Like I can see the women with young children and the pregnant women, of course, are concerned about their health and the health of their children, whereas first responders are going to have, I think, more lasting kind of PTSD effects. So it's sort of a different sort of psychological issue. People who are evacuated, you can see the others on the list here, who are more likely to develop those psychological issues. Even people who work in public safety, they need to, it says, examine themselves and their peers for signs of psychological trauma. Guys, I think it's really, really hard to ever see this in yourself, right? Because we're going to say, well, I'm fine. I'm good. I can go another 5 hours. I'm going to be good. But what I'm asking you all is to please keep an eye on your peers, because they may not see it in themselves, but you might say, hey, you know what? It's been a while since you took a break. Why don't you go lay down for a little while or just go get some water? or something. And so I want you to look out for each other psychologically, just like you look out for each other's physical well-being. All right, so as far as children and parents, children are more vulnerable to radiation exposure, and so they could become sicker quicker than adults because of their small size. And of course, the parents are going to be extremely anxious about this and about both the short and long-term health effects on their children. So make sure the parents know to monitor their children, and that also the children are going to pick up on any anxiety that the parents have. And so it's best for them to try to stay calm and positive, to make sure that they can help the kids to not be scared. And then give them some access to education so that they will know what to expect and the truth about what's really going on with them. For pregnant women, we want to triage them and get them into some case management programs for increased support. Make sure that they talk to their OBGYN about any questions or concerns regarding their pregnancy. And they may need individual counseling if they're concerned about, what's going on with their child. And then make sure that their psychological status is monitored throughout the pregnancy and delivery of their baby. But that's not your job, because you're only there just in the moment, right? For older adults who may have mobility issues or other pre-existing health issues, it can really increase their feelings of vulnerability because, obviously they're not as mobile, or I already had this other health issue and now I've been exposed to radiation. What's going to happen to me? So what we want to do is to involve them in assisting other people, because I think we've all heard this, that the best way that you can help yourself is by helping someone else. So if you're ever feeling down or having something going on with yourself, if you go out and help others, it can really improve your own outlook on life. So maybe we can get these guys to help us out in the reception center. Like, hey, could you help me hand out some of this bottled water or something like that? We want to include screenings for depression and anxiety for people of all ages, not just our older adults. And then encourage physical activity as much as they can, to just keep them moving, because we don't want people just sitting in a corner and not doing anything. And then also try to link them up with their own social support groups. So if they're somebody I can call for you, or get them in touch with whoever it is that provides support for them. As far as our culturally diverse groups, so whoever is a member of the non-dominant culture, if they're recent immigrants or refugees or undocumented citizens, they could be really fearful and anxious about the event, and that could compound their existing feelings. So one thing that's important to know about reception centers and disaster shelters in general is we never ask questions about citizenship. That is not our job. Well, we're there, and everybody is welcome who needs to be there, and try to put them at ease that's not a threat, as long as they are there at that shelter or that reception center. Now, we may have an issue if they speak a different language and you don't speak the same language that they do. That can make it more challenging to try to help them. And they also may not understand the warnings that came out, whether it was on television or radio, that they're not getting good information if they're not understanding it in the language that it comes in. They also may be more resistant to seeking healthcare because they're worried about their immigration status. So things that we can do to help them out is to prepare some educational materials in advance. If you know what the predominant language may be in that area, maybe you can have some educational materials prepared in that language so that they can consume the information that they're trying to get. If we could use local radio and television to use the different languages, or if it's sign language or whatever it is we need for people to get that information, we need to get it to them as best we can. Find out who the leaders are in their communities so that you can get the information to them, and then they can disseminate it within that community. That can also be really, really helpful. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be developing the outreach plans. I think that needs to be done at the emergency management or public health level, but it would be good to be aware of those things.
I have kept you right at an hour already, so I don't want to go too much further. Do you all have questions, comments on anything that we've covered up to this point? Stop this for 1 second. I don't think, yeah, we're almost to the end point anyway. I do want to show this slide here though. Not seeing any questions or comments. Let me just share this really quick. And I'll be sending out, either myself or Sean will send an email out about this. Our annual meeting is scheduled for November 15th, which is a Saturday. It'll be from 9 to 5 at the Chatham County Emergency Operations Center in Pittsboro. It will be listed in terms this week, and we'll let you know when it's up there so you can register. And we are looking, as we did last year in Charlotte, we're hoping that we're going to be able to provide lodging and lunch that day. So we're actually going to send a poll out to see how many of you who are coming may need lodging. So that I have to, in case y'all didn't know, or maybe it's too much information, but Revc is funded off of a grant, which is nearing the end of its life, but we're hoping that we're going to find a way to keep Revc going in the new year. We're currently funded through December. So we definitely have the grant to cover this meeting in November, but it's really helpful for us to know how many of you might need a hotel room to make sure we do have the money that we need to cover that. So we're going to send that out as a poll. So if you according to North Carolina emergency management rules for reimbursement, but it's not even reimbursement because we're not going to reimburse you, we're going to pay for it, but you must live more than 50 miles away in order for us to provide you a hotel room. So we'll send that out. If you live more than 50 miles from Pittsboro, then we will be able to provide a hotel room for you. And then everybody will get lunch, no matter how far away or how close you live. So look for more information on that. That's Saturday, November 15th. And we are planning to get that information out to you this week, get it on terms, get the poll out to you so we know how many hotel rooms we need to pay for. Yeah, so that's all good. I hope that everybody had a chance to put their name in the chat so that will help me with attendance. But I'm just trying to read the chat at the same time. Good. I can see some of you are already planning to be there. That's great. And I need to figure out, I need to make sure I save this chat. There we go, save chat, so that I have the list of everybody that was there. And if y'all don't have any further questions or comments, feel free to unmute yourself if you do have a comment. Oh, the suicide hotline. Thank you for asking that. It's 988. So I know Fred just asked in there, what is the suicide hotline? I hope it's not you. If you know of anybody who's having an information or a crisis with suicide, they can call 988. That's free. They can also text 988 if they would rather do that by chat instead of actually talking to someone, or they have a website, 988lifeline.org. And that could be if you're worried about someone, if you need to talk to someone and say, hey, I saw my friend exhibiting this behavior, blah, 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 they can help you with that. Or if you yourself are having any sort of crisis, then you can reach out to this as well. And it's totally free. So yes, thank you for asking that. I think it was Fred who asked suicide hotline 988. And I see some of you are putting in the chat that you're planning on attending. That's great. I'll save the chat again to make sure I still have that. We are still going to send out that poll though, so that I can have a good count of who I need to house for that. So thank y'all again. I appreciate everything that you do. And there will be more opportunities for reception centers and all the other good things that you've been doing, emergency worker decon and all of that. So thank you all so much. And I look forward to seeing you in November, and look for an email this week with more information on that meeting. Thank you all so much. Yes.
Samantha, this is Tony. Did you get my 2 emails I sent you this afternoon?
I did, and we'll handle that offline. That's not part of this meeting, but thank you.
True. Yeah, right.
Okay. Anybody else? Any questions, issues? All right. Thanks for taking your time in the evening. Appreciate you guys. I'm gonna stop the recording.